Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're joined here tonight in the studio by Dr. Cherif Amir, the Professor of Geopolitical Affairs at Paris University. Dr. Amir, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Amir, I mean, we're talking about Egypt reaffirming its relations with the Asian continent as a whole, but also mainly the Afro-Asian countries. And when we talk about the Afro-Asian countries, so many files, but let's start off with Lebanon, because Lebanon is already going through a political turmoil that's been going on even for about a year now, exactly, since the port bombing in Beirut. Trying to form a government, trying to have a prime minister, the latest of which was Hariri, who stepped down, and now Najib Mikati is assuming this position. How successful do you think he might be at actually forming a government and getting the country back together?
Well, I think that what's taking place in Lebanon is not something new, but it's alarming this time. I think that the Prime Minister Mikati will have very tough task because he was appointed by President Michel Aoun, and we all know that the other factions, whether the Prime Minister Hariri at that time, they're all against his policies. So I think that there is a paralysis inside the country. We have seen some armed confrontations lately in Lebanon, in a part called Khalda, and there was a young man who was killed, and then the whole communities started fighting each other. I think that the army is trying to see how to control the situation, but there is something very interesting in all that, is that the problem is about money, and money is there, but no one wants to introduce the money. So that means that it is being done in purpose. There are some factions who are trying to show that they are the main factors there. We have seen the Hezbollah who try to show that they control the situation. They said even the gas, the oil, I mean, would come from Iran freely, and it didn't work. So I think that Lebanon is heading to a point that will change the core of history of this country.
Well, when Saad al-Hariri actually stepped down, there was an uproar among the Lebanese people. Would you say that he had at least the full backing of the Lebanese people? Because this is what it looked like.
Let's be frank. In Lebanon, there is no full backing because of the community and the sectarian differences. So it depends only if some of the factions will say, for example, the Maronites will say we will stand with Hariri. But even though things are not clear, because the Hezbollah and the Iranians and even the Greek Orthodox community there and the Armenians are siding with this part, with the Hezbollah, siding with Iran. The other part, it means Saudi Arabia. So there is a huge difference between these two parts. Lebanon is the hub of all the interest of outside countries since the 1970s. And even when there was Hafez al-Assad in Syria and Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and both were from the Ba'ath party, they were fighting each other in Lebanon. So I think that we are witnessing a new form of recreation of Lebanon, but we are witnessing the downfall of the structure, the infrastructure, because as I said, the solution is there. And as the French said and the EU said, we have the solution, but no one wants to apply it. Why? Since last year, August 4th, 2020. And imagine that the same port that was destroyed, nothing was changed since then. 12 months. We know there was the COVID-19 and everything was still, but nothing was touched. Everything as is still the scene is the same. So I think that Lebanon now is trying to figure out how they will find a compromise to separate the communities afterwards, because it seems that the problem is the president, and the president is not willing to leave, and I think that the factions or the political parties are not willing to give any solutions until he leaves.
Yes. Well, what about Najib Mikati then? I mean, he was prime minister twice before. Do you think that a third time lucky can be an option on the table? I mean, what can he do now that can actually solve the problem? Is it still in his hands? Is it still an option? How was his 2 terms as prime minister? How were they viewed before that actually gives Michel Aoun a confidence, I mean, in Najib Mikati to actually succeed where previous prime minister designates failed?
Well, he has experience, but in this situation, is experience sufficient? I don't know. I think that Prime Minister Hariri, the fact that he got the offer and he declined, that means there is something in his intention and in the mind of Saudi Arabia also. Let's say it clearly, this is the main confrontation between Iran and Saudi Arabia on the land, on the soil of Lebanon, and even in the Sunni sector. It means that Najib Mikati was a Sunni, but he has differences with Saad al-Hariri. If this will be the solution that President Aoun saw, that he will bring someone who has experience, will find a solution for the country's crisis, I think that no, I won't be that optimistic, because from what we have seen last month, something is wrong inside the country. There are many factions who want to, let's say, make the other faction weak. And, and I mean by that, to be clear, there is a strong chance that Hezbollah could be weakened. And I think that many countries in the region are watching carefully what's going on, because once the Hezbollah will be pulled into a confrontation inside Lebanon, and it has its forces inside Syria, it will be very easy for Israel at a certain time to do as they did in the 1980s, when they said it was the chaos in Lebanon, we have to go and make they called it the Peace of Galilee in 1982 operation, and they went in there. So I think that many countries now are waiting for the Hezbollah to be very, very shaky, and then things will change. So Najib Mikati, he has the experience, but he doesn't have the tools this time.
Yes. Well, Dr. Amir, you've mentioned that the solution is actually there. The money is actually there. Now, Najib Mikati is a media mogul, and he's considered one of the richest people of Lebanon, if not the richest, which could mean that it could be an advantage for him making and breaking deals, having the business guts in order to get in and start taking money out, or start putting money in, or facilitating and moving the money. I mean, he's not a reluctant, maybe a financially reluctant politician. So, and having Lebanon in such a dire financial and economic state, does that really give him the green light to actually make bold moves and maybe get it back together?
Well, I adopt a theory that politics controls money, not money controls politics. He could have all the money, but if he has strong opposition, he won't be able to act as he wish. Well, he's not Donald Trump of Lebanon, but let's say that even Donald Trump couldn't manage to have his second term.
Yes.
So if it's about money, it could be solved very easily like that. But I think that the one who has the money, and let's speak frankly, those who have the money always are guided by interests of those who govern other countries. We all know that everyone who invests inside Lebanon are, even with Saudi Arabia or with Iran. And if they have the green light would come from outside Lebanon. This is the problem of Lebanon.
Yes.
It's not about who has the money and he could find a solution. And if he will try to find an independent solution, we have seen what happened to Rafiq al-Hariri.
Okay, well, let's talk about Egypt and Lebanon. They obviously have deeply rooted historic relations. We've seen the aid that Egypt has sent right after the port explosion on August 4th, and also during the coronavirus and all of that. And also, quite recently, President al-Sisi received the commander of the Lebanese army. Now, where does Egypt stand regarding what's happening in Lebanon? What do they want? What does Egypt want to see? What can Egypt actually do, if anything, to get them back together and maybe successfully form a government?
Well, look, I will look at the situation in the whole region, not only in Lebanon, to explain what's Egypt's position towards Lebanon. There were 3 points it's a triangle. After Donald Trump left the administration, the presidency of the United States, 3 countries were about to just be changed forever. Jordan, what we have seen was the attempt coup of Crown Prince Hamza. Then Tunisia, and we have seen how Qais bin Said acted quickly before the country would, and Lebanon. These small 3 countries were about to change forever and were the keys of changing the whole Middle East. And Egypt is in the middle. If you look at the map, Egypt is, that's why President Sisi contacted King Abdullah of Jordan, and we stood with our brothers there to stop the chaos taking place. It was at the last minute. Everything was prepared. The same thing with Tunisia. The country was devastated by the COVID-19, no solution, corruption, and another party was destroying the country. And then Qais Said came to Egypt. He spoke with President Sisi, and we have seen the bold actions that saved Tunisia a few days ago. And now the same thing is happening in Lebanon. But Lebanon is the most complicated because of the factions, of the foreign interest. I think that Egypt is very alarmed by the presence of Iran in many Arab countries, as you said, the Arab Asian countries in the Gulf. What took place in the Gulf of Oman 2 days ago, the drone who attacked the petrol, the ship transporting the oil. This is unacceptable.
Yes.
The attacks of the Houthi against Saudi Arabia also. So I think the same thing is happening in Lebanon. How come a country that is facing an economic problem, a party, and I mean a party, not a government, says we will call another country who would come and help us? I mean by that Hezbollah, and said we will call Iran to come and give us the oil and the food and the medicine. Who is Hezbollah and all that? It's just a party. How come they have the keys of solving the problem of the country? So I think that President Sisi, when he met the head of the Lebanese army, the message is clear. You have a duty as to fight for the people, as the armed forces in Egypt fought for the people when the people said enough in June 30th, 2013. So I think that the message is clear. He's giving the advice, as we gave the advice to Khalifa Haftar to fight terrorism. We give the same advice to in Sudan, to the government there, to the army. So I think they have to assume the responsibility act as a force that will change the facts on the ground. There is two problems in the Lebanese army. First of all, the shortage of the arms, because we all know that Hezbollah is more powerful, of course. The second problem is the sectarian problem inside the army. This is what happened in Iraq, and this is what happened in Syria, and as the tribal problems, what happened in Libya. So I think Egypt is trying to give a message to the Lebanese people and to the Lebanese state: be aware, you are in the same zone like Jordan, like Tunisia, and now it's Lebanon and this triangle. So we are working very carefully with them, because we have to ensure that Lebanon has its sovereignty preserved, and that Saudi Arabia and Iran won't be pushed into a confrontation that will destroy the whole country.
Yes. Well, one last question about Lebanon, but let's imagine the worst case scenario. Najib Mikati fails at forming a cabinet. What happens next? Does Michel Aoun assign or appoint another prime minister designate, or do you see maybe the European Union and countries such as France maybe taking a closer step or interfering or trying to change things themselves?
There is a third worst scenarios. The fighting could flare everywhere. Every Lebanese home has arms. So I think that's very scary, because we could all be focused on the round tables, on the conferences, and then someone fires a bullet and everything goes wrong.
Yes.
So this is what happened in Lebanon in the 1975 civil war. It started like that. So I think that if Najib Mikati would fail to create a government, and I think he will create a government, but it won't find a solution. That's what happened. So I think that at that point, President Aoun will have the advice from the army.
Yes.
How to act.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Egypt is really making its stance known for the Arab Asian countries. Started off with Beirut, started off with Lebanon, but there are other files as well, as Dr. Amir mentioned, Tunisia and Jordan, also Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. So Egypt is involved quite heavily in the Asian continent, and it is invited to participate in the Asia's interaction and confidence building measures. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has been rapidly drawing Egypt closer to Russia and China, which have been increasing their presence in the Middle East. Egypt has been strengthening its relations with Russia, especially in the military field. The formation of the Russian footholds in the Mediterranean region in northern Egypt includes the construction of a nuclear power plant in Daba, the construction of an industrial park of Russian companies on the east coast of Port Said. President Sisi has purchased Russian military equipment. Egypt signed an agreement with Russia to purchase 24 Su-35 aircrafts, which was delivered in the beginning of 2021. Russian products are being used in the security sector in Egypt through private companies linked to the military. China's presence in Egypt has also become prominent since President Sisi took office due to China's position as an economic power that does not use human rights as a pretext for political pressure and as an influential member of the international community. Since China agreed to comprehensive strategic partnership with Egypt in December 2014, China's investment in Egypt has picked up momentum, with its direct investment increasing by 4.6% year-on-year in the first half of 2019. China's trade with Egypt in 2019 accounted for only 0.5% of its total exports and less than 0.1% of its total imports. Egypt's trade with China, on the other hand, accounted for 2% of the country's total exports, but 50% of its total imports, making China its largest importer. This relation reflected in the mutual visits of the two leaders. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has visited China 6 times in a total as of June 2021, while President Xi Jinping visited Egypt only once in 2016. Currently, the two sides are strengthening bilateral relations through the implementation of several mega projects by Chinese companies. A prime example is the new administrative capital, which is built 40 kilometers east of Cairo. Chinese companies are now playing a central role in the construction of facilities. They're in cooperation with local companies under the Egyptian military. Chinese companies will also be taking a leading role in the construction of a high-speed railway. The railway will connect the Mediterranean coast from Egypt, China, Suez Economic Trades Cooperation Zone along the Gulf of Suez by the administrative capital and New Cairo. The construction of the high-speed railway is expected to further increase China's presence in Egypt. Egypt also enjoys good relations with other Asian countries like North Korea, South Korea, Thailand, India and Pakistan in various domains and at all levels of cooperation, especially the economic one.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Amir. Now, Doctor, you've mentioned that Lebanon is really, it has a very strong Iranian presence, and Iran has a presence within the region as a whole. And it's many countries and many different parts of the world are involved in the Lebanese situation, including Saudi Arabia as well, that has its own issues with Yemen, that has its own issues with Iran. We've seen for a few years Egypt joining the Saudi-led coalition fighting the Houthi militias in Yemen. With the developments taking place in Lebanon and quite recently as well Tunisia and Jordan, how do you see this sort of triangle or the direct sort of confrontation between Saudi Arabia and Iran, this conflict of ideologies and the battlegrounds that are existing elsewhere in the region? How do you see it maybe playing out?
Well, I think that the American administration of Joe Biden is very confused about how to act and to deal with the Iranian problem. Mm-hmm. They want to go fast in the nuclear deal, mm-hmm. and the EU wants that. But the allies of the United States in the Middle East are against that, mm-hmm. whether Egypt, Saudi Arabia, even we have seen King Abdullah of Jordan when he went to the States. He said, had a very weird statement. He said, we were attacked by Iranian drones. Mm-hmm. This was the first time we heard that. We were attacked, and then he explained in a way or another. They said, well, they crossed our airspace and to attack Saudi Arabia, but he said it. We were attacked. We were the target of Iranian drones. Mm-hmm. So Jordan also is not happy with that, the Gulf states. So all these, and of course Israel, all mm-hmm. these are the hub of America and the Middle East. Mm-hmm. I think that the main problem now for the Iranian government now is to try to go on in negotiating and gaining territory and gaining time, so sanctions would not destroy their government, and then they will go on with their presence in the region. Mm-hmm. For instance, the oil tanker that I told you about, yes. in the Gulf that was attacked by the Iranian drone, 2 citizens were killed, European citizens, aboard. It was a British and a Romanian. Yes. The British didn't say a word. Mm-hmm. The Romanians, since yesterday, are making all their efforts, deploy their efforts to retaliate from Iran. They even called the ambassador of Iran, and they said on the public TV that Iran is behind it. So Iran called the Romanian ambassador, and then Romania called the Iranian ambassador.
Yes, yeah.
And then they said, the Romanians, they said the following statement: we will take revenge, and we are trying to see with our partners, meaning the EU, how to retaliate, and we will retaliate. The EU is not really acting.
Yes.
They don't want this kind of confrontation. So Joe Biden a minute ago said, well, the attack against the oil tanker will be, we are preparing a collective response. So they have a problem, and they do not know how to deal with this problem. To negotiate with Iran and lose our allies, or to confront Iran, and they do not want this confrontation, especially the EU doesn't want this confrontation. So I think that what is taking place in the region now is a real confusion inside the US administration. They do not know how to act. It was the mentality of Barack Obama's administration, but it's not the same scenario, so they are incapable to act. For example, for instance, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, before he was appointed, he used to criticize Egypt because he was from the Obama administration, or the same field, let's say. And when he became Secretary of State, first visit he came to Egypt, and he has very good relations with President Sisi. They started to realize that things on the ground have changed from 2011. It's not the same situation. So they had a plan, and the plan is not working. And then King Abdullah, they tried to get rid of him. He made this visit to Washington, and then Joe Biden, he said, well, and the Prince of Jordan was his father. And Joe Biden told him, I used to hang out with your father. And then they became, and he said, King Abdullah, he said, we are the allies of the United States, we will stand with the United States. So they didn't change anything in Jordan. Then what took place in Tunisia? They said, well, the people, they are confused. So what we are witnessing now is a total confusion of the US administration about the Middle East. They have several problems, they had the solutions, but the facts on the ground are totally different. The 4 years of Donald Trump changed a lot.
Yes, but with what you're saying, it sounds like Iran is not losing some of its power, but at least losing some of its steam or some of its bite, if we may say. Do you think that can change things?
Iran is being squeezed inside Lebanon and inside Syria, and Syria became a trap. But it's not losing ground in Yemen. They're still threatening Saudi Arabia, and threatening Saudi Arabia with a lethal force. They can attack the airports at any time. They're still present in Bab al-Mandab Strait. They could act at any time. They showed the international community how they acted in the Gulf of Oman. So I think that the Iranians are still present because they have several communities, several businessmen working for them. They're strongly present in West Africa with their Lebanese businessmen, but they're all Shia. But the problem, the main problem for Iran is the inside now, and this is the crisis. The country isn't that strong economically. Politically, they are trying to act as a democratic country, but it won't be that easy because we have seen things went out of control in some parts lately, and people were killed when they had shortage of electricity, shortage of water. Even there was this joke about they had this in Tehran square, there was this big clock for the timing of the downfall of Israel, and when the electricity went down, the clock stopped. So everyone said, well, we have to restart again counting for the downfall of Israel. So Iran the Iranian regime is facing its own people in the inside. They are trying to show the people that we have power everywhere, regional power, but the critics are saying inside Iran, no, you are financing terrorism. You are spending the money that we need for food, for medicine, to stop these sanctions. We are trying to find electricity, water, and you're spending the money on Hezbollah and in Syria. You're funding the Houthis, you're funding the communities in Bahrain. So they're not happy.
Yes.
And let's not forget that mainly the Iranian youth, and a huge number of them, they are more Persian in their heart than Islamic souls as the government. No, they have this thing that they have the Aryan blood and they are Persians, and whenever they will have the supremacy in the region, it will be in the name of Persia, not religion. They do not want to war because of religion.
Yes.
So this is a huge problem between the government there and the young people.
One final question, because we're running out of time. You've pointed out to how does the U.S. administration feel about it, the European Union, Romania, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. What about Russia? Where do they stand? I mean, what's their say regarding the Iranian situation and maybe their influence on countries such as Lebanon?
Well, as we all know, President Putin is watching and smiling. He knows, he calculates very well the situation, and he doesn't get involved. And he said it before, I'm not trying to be like the United States to force the control. No, but he's creating chaos. I remember the Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, he said it once, if the United States have several the ships that have
the vessels,
the airplanes, the carriers. We have the means to destroy them. It's not necessarily because you have carriers that we will make carriers.
Yes.
So I think that Russia is very, very clever in this game, controlling the situation.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as Dr. Amir mentioned, it is a very complicated situation in the Asian countries, especially the Arab Asian countries, and definitely it needs a lot of diplomacy, and Egypt's diplomacy has never let us down and always proved very successful, very patient and very wise in dealing similar situations, and hopefully the same will be for this scenario. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. Cherif Amir, the Professor of Geopolitical Affairs at Paris University. Dr. Amir, always a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on NILE International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.